Okay, everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Environment Select Scrutiny meeting. First of all, we'll start with apologies. Simon, apologies.
Yeah. We have apologies from Councillor Jackson, Councillor McGrath and Councillor Matthew.
Do we have any substitutions or not on any of them? No? Right, okay. Right, so item 2, is the committee happy for me to move the minutes for the meetings held on the 12th of November as a true record? Are we happy with that? Can I have a proposer? Stuart, Councillor Wheeler, a seconder. Ian Wallace, Councillor. All happy with that? Yeah, fine. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of disclosable interest or dispensations as granted by the Standards Committee? Looks like there are none. I've got no chairman's announcements, but as you can see in front of you, we've got a fairly large agenda item relating to the local transport plan. I did request last week for members to write in questions. Unfortunately, I only had one, so thanks, Councillor Budden, for writing your questions in, so you'll be able to get some answers. I try and steer off of parochiality on this one because we've got to be out of this room by 1 o'clock, so because it's in use again this afternoon. So I'll take questions, but make sure they're questions, not statements. And I welcome Graham Wright, who sat on the sidelines working from home. I'll be bringing you in fairly early on this report as well, Graham, as climate chairman of the Climate Emergency Group. Right, so I'm not going to hang around any more. I'm going to move straight on to the first item, I think, which is, public participation. No public participation? No. So let's keep your questions short. No parochiality. Number 6, local transport plan. Welcome, Tamara, and welcome to all of you. Over to you, officers.
Perfect. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. We're very pleased to bring the LTP4 to the Environment Select Committee. Thank you to everybody who has taken the time to read the plan, the draft plan, and also to contribute to the consultation. As you may be aware, there have been 2 webinars, the second one of which was last night, and it was very well attended. I should say that the plan has been developed through a one council approach with a steering group comprising officers from across the council, and as well as myself as cabinet member for transport and assets. Also Nick Holder, cabinet member for highways, and Dominic Munns as cabinet member for environment and waste. So I won't add anything else at this stage. I'm going to hand over to Sam Howell, who will provide some more detail about the plan itself before we take your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. So the purpose of the report is to provide an overview on the 4th Wiltshire Local Transport Plan. I should say we have an adopted local transport plan, LTP3 as we call it, that runs to the period 2026. And the purpose of moving forward with the draft document, which is currently at consultation, is to ensure we have a strategic framework aligned to the Wiltshire local plan, but also to meet objectives at a national, regional and local level. So I must be really clear that the transport plan, which is currently being consulted on, is a strategic document. It ensures we have a policy framework in which we can enable all our detailed delivery plans and interventions which meet both our business plan objectives but our wider objectives, particularly around sustainable growth and our decarbonisation agenda. As set out in the background of the report, all local transport authorities are required to produce an LTP. The transport evidence base, which supports the local transport plan, also supports the local plan. So you should see a clear line of sight in terms of our evidence-based approach. It's really important for us to ensure we have a safe, reliable and effective transport system, which works now, but is also fit for the future. A key part of that is ensuring evidence-based decisions around journey purpose and modal choice to ensure that we are meeting our priorities, but also delivering cost-effective solutions, given that resources, and particularly central government funding picture, is changing at pace. So main considerations for the committee are set out from paragraph 6 onwards. We have detailed the structure and content of the main document. I should say I appreciate it is a very weighty tome, but it's important that we have covered all the key strategy elements at this point in time. It's important that we understand a place-based approach, which is very much aligned to our local plan. So ensuring that one size doesn't fit all in Wiltshire. We understand differences in terms of interventions that will be appropriate in our city and market towns are not the same interventions that will be successful in our rural areas. We've developed a core strategy, our place-based sub-strategies, and we've also gone into detail around some of our themed policy approaches. So, for example, freight and asset management. As Tamara said, we are currently at consultation, so following presentation of the document for consultation to Cabinet in November, we commenced a statutory consultation. It is required by government that we undertake statutory consultation, and that closes on the 24th of January. Pleased to say we have had a considerable number of responses to date already. We've had a comprehensive communication and engagement plan. We've worked with area boards. We've also undertaken lots of social media updates. We've obviously identified key partners who we need to work with to ensure delivery of our vision and our outcomes. And we've been well supported in the webinar events, 2 webinar events, as Tamara has said. So in conclusion, I would say local transport plan, as I say, is a statutory requirement, and it's really important we've developed a comprehensive evidence base to support the local plan, but our other business plan priorities. It's been prepared through initial stakeholder consultation and engagement with delivery partners, but also context of conversations with Western Gateway as our regional transport body. We presented it to Cabinet, and subject to the number of representations we receive and officer responses, we would like to move forward with adoption of the document in the spring. Following adoption of LTP4, we will be working on the detailed delivery plans, and I should say some advanced work has already commenced on those. So things like car parking strategy, rail strategy and freight strategy. Thank you, Chair. Pause there for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Just had a member of the public come a few minutes late. I don't know what sort of mode of transport you come on, Andrew, but I will allow you to now ask a question or make a statement. Keep it as tight as you can, and away we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was here in the building just after 25 past. The bottleneck is from the atrium to this room. Thank you. And in the course of my statement, I'm going to ask you, Chair, whether you'll allow me to ask an urgent question, and the reason for the urgency will be that the consultation closes in 10 days. So, I'm a member and currently chair of Wiltshire Climate Alliance. We scrutinise these things, of course, and that's what you expect of us. I think there's some gaslighting going on here. The vision refers to low carbon future. Well, the council made a commitment in 2019 to a zero carbon future. And the aspiration was, of course, for 2030. But that was an aspiration. And so clearly we understand from that resolution in February 29 full council that you want us to become, as a county, as close to zero carbon neutral as possible, as soon after 2030 as possible, and feasible. Well, there was a fork in the road in the Atkins local transport evidence base for the local plan review, which is part of the local plan review examination documents. An option, a high ambition option is presented that brings us considerably lower in our transport emissions than we see from the assessment of this local transport plan. The local transport plan makes the choice not to introduce measures which would bring us closer to that target, and the reason given is that they would be more appropriately put in at regional or national level. But so the vision that says low carbon future, that doesn't represent the reality of a local transport plan. We find the local transport plan draft to be very repetitive and very vague. It's like it doesn't tell us what you actually plan to do. It's more of a menu than a meal. But let me ask, point to, I'm sorry, the way the plan has been put together, and particularly highlight that the trajectory to low carbon brought in by the anthesis report for the county has been rejected in passing in paragraphs in the carbon paper document on grounds that it's out of date. So that's been dumped. But it hasn't had any replacement. The Department of Transport want you local authorities to use a locally generated trajectory for decarbonising transport if you have one, and only then to use their one. Well, this report uses their one, even though we have one. And that's just an example of the way that the whole thrust of the local transport plan in this draft is abandoning, for the first time I think, in a formal document, your commitment as a council to moving transport as part of the council's own full policies to low carbon neutral. So my question is this: if the anthesis county report and its carbon reduction trajectory for transport is in fact obsolete and out of date, why was that not mentioned in the Council's update on the climate emergency and the climate strategy that was introduced to full council in, I think it was October just last year, introduced by Mr. Kansari? Why was that not mentioned in the climate strategy update? Were members of full council not entitled to be informed that a working group of officers has decided that that's outdated and to be dumped?
Well, you've had your 3 minutes and you've asked a question from Sama Parvis. Would you, Tamara, if you'd like to answer that question to Andrew Nicholson.
Thank you for the question, Andrew. And as always, we welcome the Wiltshire Climate Alliance's input into our climate plans and the delivery of those climate plans.
Thank you, Councillor.
I would start by saying, as you know, our 2030 plans are ambitions, ones that this council was pleased to adopt in 2019 and continue to be ambitions. We have absolutely not abandoned the anthesis report and the trajectories, but we have to be real. We're living in a complex world with many parts that will help us achieve our climate ambitions. And I'm pleased that at next week's Cabinet, the climate delivery plan will be discussed at Cabinet, and no doubt that you will contribute to that debate too. So, clearly we live in a rural county. There are many, many challenges. Not everything is within Wiltshire Council's gift, but I am confident that this LTP4 is, the very best that we can do, and we will continue to work towards decarbonisation. I'm pleased that we have been successful with our Zebra funding for e-buses, 23 committed in Salisbury, and we now know that we have another funding to support another 7. You're all very aware of the work that we have done with demand responsive transport, where we are seeing a significant uplift in passenger journeys in the Pewsey Vale and the wider Devizes, Hungerford, Marlborough area, and the officer team are working really hard to make that service operationally and financially sustainable, and to prepare plans to roll out to replace existing not very well used services in the Malmesbury and Mere and Warminster areas later this year. So I think there's an awful lot that we're doing. There are a lot of moving parts, and we remain committed to that 2030 ambition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And say, look forward to see you at Cabinet next week, and I dare say taking more active role in it. Sam.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just add to that, I think a couple of points worth noting in the detail in response, and obviously we're disappointed regarding the perception of the ambitions. I did just want to highlight in terms of the menu of options, absolutely, this is about identifying what is available to us as we move forward into detailed delivery plans upon adoption of the local transport plan. So it is very much about the strategic framework, and I think in our engagement we've been very clear that we don't have a detailed line of sight on all the interventions yet. The other thing I would just refer members to is the very detailed carbon report which accompanies LTP4, and that sets out very clearly the fact that the antithesis report absolutely is not abandoned or obsolete, but as Tamara said, we have to be realistic in what we can achieve, what we can control as a council, but also what we can influence within Wiltshire and with our partners. And we have clearly identified that additional national and regional action is required to tackle the emissions as identified in that high performing output. So please be assured we continue to work in that context, but it's important that we have a deliverable, realistic and cost effective plan moving forward. Hope that helps.
Thank you for that, Sam. Okay.
Thank you, Ms Howell. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. So now we'll move to the questions from members of the council on my committee. So first, I requested people to write in last week. The only person that wrote in was Councillor Budden. So we will put those up on the screen. Press the presentation button there. They should be coming up on your screen now somewhere. Yep. They up? Yep, all right. Councillor Budden, you asked a range of questions here, and I think, Sam, you've had a look at them, a few of you had a look at the questions. Have you got any answers to those questions? I mean, I don't want to go individually, I don't know unless you want to, Richard, but they're there in front of us, okay?
Chairman, thank you for taking them. I would be happy to hear a verbal response in general terms from the officers involved. I do have one additional question which I would like, if possible, to put as well afterwards.
Put that one after, then just take these questions from there then. Right, Sam?
Thank you, Councillor Budden. Appreciate you submitting the questions in advance. In terms of the first question, which is specifically focused around travel to work distances and actually the interdependencies with the Wiltshire local plan, I touched on in terms of introduction that the transport evidence space behind the local plan has also informed the LTP, as you would expect. And I think there's two parts in response I would draw out. One is understanding how people are working in a post-COVID environment. So obviously the interventions that were originally implemented and a hybrid working, which was particularly successful, so some organisations over others, we still need time to understand the trends in what's happening across the network and how employers are responding. But that's a very live conversation. And the second part is linking into new developments and local employment sites and ensuring that we have local sustainable growth, which is very much outside the direct remit of the local transport plan, I should say, but highlighting those interdependencies. And the opportunities that we will have through a policy context of ensuring things like sustainable travel plans for businesses. So that work is in train, but as I say, it's not specifically covered in the LTP because of the strategic nature of the document at this time. Hope that helps. In terms of analysing current volumes of commuters into main centres of population, it's not as easy to go to one data set, if you like. So it's a correlation of lots of different elements and then a forecasting element through our transport modelling. So there is lots of detail within the evidence base about how that's been achieved. But I would say at this point in time, again, it's something we need to monitor and understand that the local transport plan will not stand steady. It will evolve over time, and that's the importance of having adaptability in our delivery plans as we move forward. And there will be plenty of opportunity to engage in those and make sure we've got residents, businesses and all other stakeholder engagement as we move through the next stage of the process. We do have regular input with Community First, so we have a very strong working relationship through our passenger transport team in terms of Community First, and we have picked up through Public Services Board as well opportunities for wider volunteer engagement. So we fully understand the importance that volunteers and particularly volunteer transport can bring in terms of making sure residents, particularly in our more rural areas, can access the services they need and they wish to visit on a more frequent basis. The final point I think is directly related related to road safety and our Vision Zero rather than our decarbonisation agenda. Appreciate that there's common terms there, but this is very much about moving towards a safer systems approach and reducing the number of killed and seriously injured people on our network as part of road traffic collisions. So we work under the umbrella of the Road Safety Partnership. The Road Safety Partnership are engaged in this process. We have regular liaison meetings with them. That's where all partners get together to work to this common objective. Vision Zero, I'm sure many of you are aware, is very ambitious in terms of reducing and getting to a point where there are no killed and seriously injured people on the network. But what I would say is we have already adopted a safer systems approach, and the work that you're directly seeing on the network at the moment at the A3102 is part of that process. So we secured a Safer Road Fund intervention specifically to help us move towards this approach at pace. Hope that helps.
So you had one more question then, Councillor Budden. Yep.
Well, let me just say thank you for that response. And if I may, I just remark on 2 points. In the case of the third bullet, volunteer, the relationship with the volunteer sector, I appreciate exists. I appreciate it's ongoing. I know that Councillor Ray is personally committed to it, and I welcome that. I observe, as in my question, I don't see any mention of it in this plan, and I do believe it should be part of the council's strategy, and if it is, then it should be somewhere in the plan. And secondly, on Vision Zero, yes, I understand you're working with other people, but again, I think as with carbon zero, unless you have a very active set of practical measures that you're going to take, it'll be very difficult to achieve. My comments. Thank you. I would ask the following question more specifically. Within the plan, I note SU 3.7, the use of advisory routes for freight. I have in my particular division, I don't wish to be parochial here, but there is a specific instance that I have in mind. Seems to me SU 3.7 is a restatement of something which exists in the previous local transport plan. Is not new. So the issue is how to put into effect something which in principle is already there. What I would ask you to do is to encourage LHFIGs to monitor the application of SU 3.7, to identify opportunities for its enforcement, and provide funds centrally to permit its implementation, relieving LHFIGs of the burden of implementing something which is county policy.
Tomorrow.
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask Sam to respond on the SU 3.7, the freight strategy, and the role of LHFIGs. But I agree that you make a very valid point. On Community First, equally, absolutely, as you have said, we recognise the importance of community transport to the public transport mix across the county, and I was delighted that last week, in very sad circumstances, when the Urchfont bus, as you may know, was involved in a very terrible road traffic collision on the A342, that the passenger transport team and Community First were on it and working with Urchfont to find a solution and to help to maintain that valuable service from Urchfont. And that is just an example of how that is working together. But I agree that we could amplify that further. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And to be fair to Councillor Budden, I've had a member from my LHFIG and from the area board. Freight management has been a problem within our area as well. I think Stuart will be aware. Russell, and we seem to be an absence of a freight management plan. Hasn't been going. It's been kicked into the long grass for many years. So, not being critical, but I think it's something we seriously need to look at in the future. Okay. Right. I've got Councillor Graham Wright sitting in the wings. I said I'd bring him forward.
Chairman, can I get an answer to my question regarding 3.7?
Oh, sorry. Apologies, Mr. Budden. I thought you'd given it. Sam?
Sorry, so just to add to what Tamara has said, just to confirm, we are obviously moving forward with detailed delivery plans for freight on adoption of LTP4. We recognise that whilst the freight industry in the main across Wiltshire behaves appropriately and responsibly, there are lots of local issues where unfortunately we're seeing poor driver behaviour. So there's a mechanism, again, in terms of our control and influence. What's really important for us is ensuring that we don't just displace any HGV traffic to further inappropriate areas. We need to ensure a comprehensive approach. So please be assured we have a process in place where we undertake annual surveys of freight, and absolutely it's really important that we get a local understanding of key issues, and that can be through the LHVIG groups. I'll specifically take the point away around monitoring and potential funding, because that's obviously a policy decision moving forward. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Budden, I thought I'd half answer it myself with freight, but I totally get you. Okay. Sorry, Graham. For the Climate Emergency Group, it looks like you're stood somewhere nice and warm, so I'll let you speak, unless that's just a good background.
Well, can you hear me okay first?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm actually breaking off from a GOGA session in Durrington, which is amazing. We've got nearly 40 people here, first event. Anyway, right. You've got with you on the committee today Councillor Wallace, Councillor Lay and Councillor Murray, who are also part of the Climate Emergency Task Group. And we've got a draft report which we haven't had time to submit formally to your committee, but we've got some sort of general remarks, and I'd like to run through how we see things. It'd be fairly brief. So under general remarks, we note that the plan is impressive. It's very comprehensive. However, it consists of a large series of dense documents, many of which are descriptive rather than prescriptive, but it contains a great deal of information. So the task group could not cope with such a huge document, so we looked at the way we could scrutinise decarbonisation and the reduction of carbon emissions in Wiltshire. So we looked at the emissions gap, we looked at the ambition, we looked at budgets, we looked at national and regional comparators, we looked at rurality, we looked at planning and development, we looked at growth and tourism, and we came up with a conclusion, which is not the most positive conclusion we've come up with as task group. And the conclusion is, without a detailed delivery plans, it's not easy to make detailed comments. So this is our response to the actual plan. However, from what the task group has seen so far in terms of decarbonisation, the plan lacks ambition and will not significantly shift carbon emissions in the transport sector. Over 5 years since the Council recognised the climate emergency, the slow incremental introduction of piecemeal programmes to reduce transport emissions is not working, in our opinion. This plan is a start, but much more needed to be done. Greater honesty about the challenges of the decarbonisation and a clear recognition of the difficulties of addressing them would make the plan more realistic. And I would almost challenge the word. I asked a member of the public to read this. They did take the time to read near enough the whole plan and asked me, why is it called a plan? Because it doesn't actually plan anything. It just is a series of statements. So there we are. I could say more, but I'm going to leave it there if that's of any help, Jerry, and ask you to, Councillor Wallace, Councillor Lay and Councillor Murray, if they'd like to add anything to that, so that you've then got a representation from the task group itself. Thanks, Jerry.
Don't go away then, Graham. Stay out there in the wind. Councillor Murray, Councillor Wallace, Councillor Lay. Anything to add to that? Unless I just go back straight to Councillor Wright. Anyone? Yeah. Nick?
Shall I do my questions at the same time?
Yeah,
it's on
just
the
a
same
statement and
theme,
question,
so-
yeah. Keep the statement short, because I'm trying to keep away from that. Carry on.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks to the officers for all the work and to the climate team for the work on highlighting the emissions gap, which is very telling and sort of sets the context for the report in terms of whether it's going to help us towards our climate target. And it's good to see that decarbonisation is a key objective, but it can't be a subsidiary one. And I get the feeling, I attended the webinar last night and, I've engaged in the process, and I get the feeling that decarbonisation is there, but you know, this is a sort of transport plan, and if we can decarbonise at the same time, that's good. But I don't think we can look at it that way. We've got to decarbonise. We know that emissions are still rising in Wiltshire, still rising globally, and we know that transport emissions have flatlined, and we've really seen very little progress. So we know a lot needs to be done, and it's very, very challenging. Absolutely, you know, it's hard for the council to do some of it, but it can do a lot more, I think. I think we need to redouble our efforts, and the plan needs to be more ambitious, very much in line with what the task force was saying. For me, it's not clear how the plan actually takes us towards national and local net zero targets. We know that 50% of Wiltshire's population live in urban areas, so you know we can't keep saying it's a rural county and we can't do anything. And car dependency can be reduced, transitions to EVs sped up. There's plenty that we can do in terms of investment in active travel. For instance, you know, when will our LC whips actually receive investment? So we've got an LC whip for Chippenham. I don't think it's been adopted yet, but it's in place. The neighbourhood plan for Chippenham's in place with a big active travel network plan. But we're not seeing the money coming in, the funding for it, and actual stuff happening. Investment on street charging, EV points. I know we're engaged in the Levi programme and there's money coming, but can we do more? Because we know we've got to get there. It's not... you know, let's people decide if they want to get there. The government's going to phase out fossil fuel vehicles. We've got to get there. Traffic neighbours and school streets, very little mention of that. And I know there's a political issue around that, which is contrary to the previous government's own sort of gear change and documents that say we need to go that way. And they bring so many other benefits as well. So some of these are listed in the carbon report, but basically I'm reflecting on what Graham Wright has said. There's very little in terms of how we're going to get there. And it would be helpful to be clear on how much we think we can achieve, what we need to achieve that, and how far it will get us, and then what others need to do, what government needs to do, what we simply feel we cannot achieve and what we haven't got the money for. So my questions are really, can we have more detail in terms of the impacts of the measures that are in the plan? And there's a good list of them in the carbon report, in terms of their carbon reduction, the funding required, and how it's going to get us towards those targets. And secondly, can we have at least a list of the delivery plans? I take the point from the officers that delivery plans will come, and some plans are already, like the EV charge point on street, you know, are already sort of there. But can we at least bring them all together in this plan and understand what they are, when they're going to come in, and the anticipated impact they're going to have in decarbonising transport in Wiltshire, so we can just see it as a plan, not just a sort of wish list. Thank you.
Okay, so I think Tamara wants to probably take that one. A lot of this is going to be down to educating the members of the public as well in our county. Absolutely, because without the public behind us, we are riding against the wind. Tamara.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you to Graham for his input. And thank you to the Climate Emergency Task Group for your continuing work on this area and on the wider climate challenge. Nick, you've made a number of very valid points, and I will ask Sam to reply on the delivery plans. But clearly, you know, as we have said a number of times, this is a strategic plan with the policies, and then the delivery plans will follow. Although many of them are in active progress right now. You know, we talk about BSIP, Levi, work on active travel. The Chippenham LC whip has been adopted, but you know, clearly, you know, the funding for the schemes that are identified there needs to come from Active Travel England, and you know, and from our local funds. But that work is very much in train. But I'll ask Sam to come in on the delivery plans.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Yeah, just to confirm in terms of the list of delivery plans, I'll certainly take away a way of presenting that in a much more accessible format. So that's a quick one for us. I think reflection on our last meeting as well, the commitment we made in terms of communication and engagement to residents. And this is a complicated area. And I think moving forward, there's definitely something we can do in terms of communicating the things we've already affected, but that clear line of sight in terms of next steps. So I think it's worth reflecting Wiltshire in terms of the resources available to us. We are already doing very well in decarbonisation, and we do have a one council approach. I just want to be clear in terms of our commitment agreements, then they're not a hierarchy effectively. They all have equal weighting. So I wouldn't want anyone to leave this meeting thinking that decarbonisation is not at the heart of the plan. It certainly is. And perhaps what's not so obvious to interested parties is the work we do through things like our supply chain. So, for example, we were recently shortlisted for a national award for decarbonisation in our highways supply chain. Perhaps as an officer team, we'll reflect on that and moving forward to Cabinet, we'll make sure that we're capturing what we're already doing very well, but actually where those challenges are and where we are reliant particularly on central government funding or indeed delivery partner funding, and that's particularly in the LC Whip arena, to ensure that we can deliver on the ground. Hope that helps.
Is it just a quick comeback?
Yeah, very quick comeback. If possible, could we introduce a little bit more of what we saw in the climate strategy with Anthesis bringing out the kind of trajectories to getting towards a net zero ambition and being realistic. So, you know, okay, if we can't do that and we're going to need government and other partners to do it, at least we can see the gap clearly and you know, people aren't sort of thinking that we're doing everything we can and then find in a few years' time we practically made no progress. We've got to make it transparent how big this challenge is and the sort of milestones along the way that we'd like to see achieved, even if we can't achieve them. And that was very clear in the Anthesis report. You had the high ambition pathway, the low ambition pathway, and the middle ground, and you could kind of get a real sense of, you know, the fact that we couldn't do it all, but that was the way it needed to go. And I'd like to see more of that in this plan. Thank you.
All noted. Councillor Wallace, you had to come on this one.
Thank you, Chair, and you'll be glad to know I'm not going to mention devices at all, apart from just now, on this one. So just to back up what Graham said, really, it was the difficulty I had with this was getting into it you know, and my day job is policy and strategy and that sort of thing, and I thought this should be fairly easy, and it really wasn't. It was quite meaty, quite difficult, and I think I only really started to understand it when I took the policy idea out of it and realised this is entirely a strategy document. You know, it is a backbone, a framework, and I think and that's why there aren't detailed delivery plans in there, because the delivery plans then come from that and this should influence that. And I think that's where my questions lie around this, as to what is the process for turning this into policies and delivery plans, and the policies that we have at the moment, when they're reviewed, will there be reference to this document? And when new policies come up, is this document something that is going to underpin all policies now around this area? And the most important question, I think, for this committee is, how do we fit into that? What's the mechanism for us reviewing the strategy and seeing that it is actually being delivered? You know, will there be regular reviews in this committee of that? So those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Wars. Yeah, you're absolutely right in terms of this is the strategic framework and the policy hook effectively for those delivery plans. So subject to adoption of the document, and we appreciate there may be, you know, significant revisions to that. That's the purpose of the consultation. There will be detailed delivery plans and, as I say, comprehensive engagement attached to each of those delivery plans. So very happy to come back to this meeting and indeed other groups to ensure that there's pre-scrutiny moving forward and scrutiny throughout the governance process. We have already started some advanced work on some of the theme strategies. So, for example, car parking. We understand this can be an emotive issue. And again, what works in some parts of the county may not suit other parts of the county. So what's really important is ensuring evidence-based decisions. So we're already collecting data in terms of car park use, for example. We have already started some advanced work around rail. Very helpful that we've had the Wiltshire Strategic Rail Study published, and the Subnational Transport Body have already done some advanced work on rail. So we will be moving forward detailed delivery plans. We'll publish those, so we'll make sure we've got a communication plan available. We've set out in terms of monitoring and evaluation some of the key steps within the documentation, and you're absolutely right. What's important is to go back and see, have we delivered on our objectives. We've undertaken that process for LTP3. I should say the key shift for us is very much around journey purpose, as we touched on earlier, rather than mode shift. So I think some of the performance indicators we will be looking at moving forward will be very specifically tailored to journey purpose rather than themed-based strategies. Hope that helps.
Thank you. So just
Right.
coming up very briefly on that, if I may, Chair, just to underline one point. Just to say it's very difficult to consult on something that people don't understand. And I do think, yeah, a lot of people will find it difficult to understand.
It's very easy to understand if you read every word, 709 pages. Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Chairman. I found several hundred pages of reading sort of lost me along the way somewhere. And as other councillors have said, it didn't seem to be targeting us to a clear path of action along the way. And that makes, it's like a story with no real progress in terms of who done it, you know, who's going to do it in our case. And that, yeah, so it was a hard read. What I did find, because I like the practical things, what I did find was the section on trains and mobility hubs, quite interesting, and the new stations and stuff. And it resurrected in my mind after a few hundred pages something that I wanted to bring to here. Some years ago, I put into the pot the fact that Salisbury has got a park and ride in my division where a lot of people live on the Salisbury to London rail line. Wilton on the other side of Salisbury, on the Salisbury to the West Country, has got a park and ride and linked by a rail, and but not linked by a rail, if you like. And to the south, on the Southampton Road, on the line that goes to Southampton from Salisbury, there's another park and ride. All of these have access to lots of people or businesses, but no trains stop at those park and rides at the moment. And it seems to me an opportunity. It probably needs a sort of digitalization, or whatever they call it, electrification of the rail network to do it. But there should be space between trains to run a linking network, like a little tram lines, in effect, linking Wilton to Salisbury, Laverstock Junction to Salisbury, and Southampton Road to Salisbury. That would re-energize those areas in terms of people using it, but also get the park and rides actually used, because they're very little used at the moment, comparatively. And it would take a lot of commuting traffic out of Salisbury, where the station and its parking and surrounds are, there's over demand for parking and insufficient parking there. And it would relieve that and save a lot of journeys going into Salisbury if we had that link, as well as the shopping and everything else. You could even veer off into, if it ever gets done, the Maltings Centre. That's probably not going to get done nowadays. So that's one set of thoughts. So my question to that would be, how does that get input into a system as a suggestion that may or may not be run with or kicked out again? Who knows? On the one hand, and the other thing is there is mentions of different stations here. Wilton some time back was going to get a station, and that's never materialized, and that's not on the list of new possible stations now on this document. So I just wondered whatever happened to Wilton station, which may not be needed if we've got the freeway links anyway, or not in the same way. Thank you.
All right, you were flirting around parochiality there, Ian, although you were just spreading it round. I'll let you off this time.
It's all the mobility hubs.
Yeah, okay, Tamara, on rails and trains.
Thank you, Ian, for your comments and observations. We absolutely recognise the importance of rail, and as Sam has said, you know, we have jumped on the coattails of the Restoring Your Railway schemes that made some progress, and I'm really pleased that we now have the ear of the industry of Network Rail, and the Wiltshire Rail strategy was a Network Rail led piece of analysis, and we will be looking to work with the industry and with government to make progress on those priorities that are identified in the Wiltshire Rail strategy. Just to go down a level in terms of detail, you will be aware, I'm sure, that for any major infrastructure, there is a whole business case process, starting with what's known as a SOBC, a strategic outline business case, going to an OBC, that stands for outline, and then FBC, which is a full business case. The process for any rail infrastructure, or any major infrastructure for that point, goes through that process. And for the items that you have identified relating to potential, for example, light rail or tram in Salisbury, I think we would need to consider those. But to be realistic, I think that, you know, whilst Salisbury has its transport challenges, that is some way into the future. But, you know, I was in Nottingham before Christmas, and they have developed a whole system of trams. Clearly, Nottingham has a significantly greater population than Salisbury, and that will always be the challenge. Just picking up on Wilton, whilst the Wilton, Devizes, Gateway and Corsham were all submitted into that Conservative government RYR programme, and had sort of pre-SOBCs developed. Devizes, Gateway and Corsham met the threshold, and that's why we then took that to the Wiltshire Rail strategy. Sadly, Wilton did not meet the threshold. That's not to say that, you know, Wilton is sort of, but for the, you know, near and medium future, I think we have to be frank that Wilton will not come back to the table. Our priorities as a county, as we have identified, are Devizes, Gateway, Corsham and Royal Wootton Bassett, and that's what's in the local transport plan and our local plan.
Sam, you were going to follow up on that?
Thank you. I won't say any more on rail because tomorrow's covered that. Thank you very much. Just want to pick up the point around park and ride and integration. So one of the key objectives of the local transport plan, and why we've moved to a journey purpose, is ensuring there is better integration between public transport, and that's bus and rail. So that's easier to do in some parts of the county, you'll appreciate, than others, but that's a key part of the strategy. And just in terms of patronage on the park and ride, I'm pleased to say that actually we are bucking the national trend. There are a couple of sites which are not performing as we would prefer at this moment in time. The whole of the sites are subject to review, but actually patronage on some of the sites is increasing at pace, and we particularly saw a peak last Christmas, which we really welcome. Partly, I should say, because of the disruption on the network, because we were undertaking significant improvement works, but we are monitoring that really closely to ensure that we're delivering value for money, and of course that will be enhanced by the electric buses which are serving the wider city network and indeed Stonehenge in future. If I could also, Chair, just pick up on the difficulty of the document. What I would say is we have spent additional time, particularly around things like the LTP animation, which I hope you've all seen, trying to summarise the document in a more user-friendly way and signposting key parts of the document. So the consultation portal on the website has been specifically designed, to ensure that if you are not interested or you don't have time to read the whole document, you can go to targeted areas. So, for example, if you're particularly interested in cycling and active travel, you don't have to go through all the other tiles and provide consultation responses to those. So we have tried hard in that area, but I fully understand there's more we can do moving forward. Thank you.
You can just come back. Is it a question?
Yes, it's on relating to the same thing. So part of my question was that the free park and rides are already linked by rail, except they're not actually linked by the rail. The railway passes alongside them. So how can that get into the system as a consideration? Because it's not a new system, not a new tram lines to be set up, it's an existing network.
So as Tamara said, there's clear business case which needs to be supported for any additional rail interventions. There have been a number of previous studies on this, and I should say, firstly, we don't think the demand is there. There is no evidence to support demand for significant additional investment in that way. But also, we don't think there's capacity on the network, on the rail network at this current time. So the integration would be through bus transport to the railway station.
Very interesting. I think you need to learn your alphabet, TFP, PT, transfer. Yeah, you're surrounded by letters. And somehow you've got to learn what those letters mean. You know, otherwise you haven't got a Scooby-Doo. TTFN, TAF, and now, you know, but this is something we're going to have to pick up on. Members, any other questions for the local transport plan? Have I got anyone else? I see you've got your hand up, Nick. I know you've had a little bite, but I'm just checking any other members before I come to you. And nobody seems to want to say this. So, Nick, you can have a final bite then, and then we'll go to
This
the
was just really a genuine question to improve my knowledge. All the electric buses seem to be going to the south of the county. Is there an issue with getting up in Chippenham in the north?
You want that one?
I'm going to take that one. Thank you. Yes,
Go on then. You have that one.
Just to confirm, the ZEBRA programme, sorry, another acronym, so the Zero Bus Regional Area programme from central government was targeted at rural areas and had to be supported by a bus company who would be responsible for delivering the network. Through our enhanced partnership, we offered the opportunity to all bus operators in Wiltshire. Go Ahead Group were most proactive, and that's probably in the part because they're so successful doing it elsewhere across the country. So the business case was really robust. I should say moving forward, we are keen to explore opportunities elsewhere in Wiltshire, and we are looking to trial electric demand responsive transport vehicle, but actually because of how successful DRT currently is and the number of miles it's doing per day, that's going to be really challenging for us. But of course, if further opportunities arise and we have interest from delivery partners, we are very happy to support and move forward. Thank you.
Okay, so right, I'm going to move to proposals then, because ones I had written down at the briefing yesterday have completely changed from that. So relating to the members' concerns. So I'm going to start that the committee, A, notes the contents of the report which sets out the progress made on the development of Wiltshire's fourth local transport plan, LTP4, to date, including the statutory consultation which runs until the 24th of January of this year. It says 24 there, actually, but we'll just make that change that. Okay. B, requests that the issues raised by the committee are considered in any new draft. For example, how it integrates with the local plan, a list of the delivery plans, and the process of development, decarbonisation, trajectories, and how Vision Zero will be achieved through the plan. And C, request a further update to this committee detailing progress, as well as the adoption and delivery of the LTP4. This should include how the Select Committee will have an oversight of the development and the delivery of the plan. And D, request that further consideration is given to how to make the plan more accessible. Right, so can I have a proposal that those are quite happy, and Councillor Murray proposes a seconder, Councillor Wallace, are we all in favour of that? All in show? Thank you very much, great. And I was awake all night thinking that was going to take forever, but we've done really well on that one. So we'll now move to the next item 7. This is the previous investment in carriageway servicing activities. So as was resolved at the last ES Environment meeting on the 12th of November, it was agreed to receive a new report breaking down carriageway surfacing spend in detail by area and road categories. This is on pages 633 to 654 of the agenda pack. Or if it's in your laptop, try and find it. Good luck, and spin it through. And we've got some officers here. I think Councillor Holder, do you want to lead on this one, Nick? This is a request by someone.
Thank you. As you've kind of stolen my thunder, Chair, because you've introduced it. This is a re-presenting of the information that was presented at the most recent Environment Select Committee meeting. So the numbers contained within the report haven't changed. We've taken them out of the tables that members found some difficulty in understanding. and put it into bare pounds and pence. So I don't really have anything to say other than really just to remind members of the committee that in terms of our approach to investment in our highways, we operate, you know, and I keep repeating these lines, but it's really important that people understand it. We operate an evidence-led, risk-based approach to our investment in our highways. So the way that the investment is put together is based upon the surveys that are carried out on a regular basis by the highways team. That information comes back through into what's called a HIAM system, and on the basis of that data, that leads us to prepare and schedule the investment in our highways, and it's important that people understand that. Thank you, Chair.
Right. I'll take questions. I think this was raised by Councillor Budden at the last Environment Select meeting to ask for the figures, and thank you very much for going into such detail and getting them back area by area. So I'll let you have the first question, Councillor Budden, and then I'll see other members. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Holder, and thank you to the officers for putting the numbers to us in this format. I appreciate that. Just to share with members, actually this goes way back before the last meeting of the Environment Select Committee. I made the request for this information first over a year ago of your predecessor, Councillor Holder, when I asked for this detail at that time. The background to that request was anxiety, which I shall do my best to avoid being parochial, but the background to that request at that time was concern about the very poor state of the roads in the rural area of South Wiltshire that I live in. And my request was focused specifically on the C and unclassified roads in southwest Wiltshire. But I'm most grateful that although it's taken over a year, I now have the data, the information to enable me to carry out the analysis that I was hoping to be able to do all of that time ago. Let me say straight away that I entirely accept the assertion which you've just made that the officers carry out the work of maintaining our roads on an evidence-led and risk-based basis. I have no reason to challenge that, but on the principle of being open and to scrutiny, it is important that residents throughout the county should be able to see just how much money, just how much of their council tax is being spent in their area and judge for themselves whether it's being spent fairly or not in its distribution across the county. Let me also say that I have no wish to comment at all on the substance insofar as it relates to A or B class roads, and I accept that officers' focus particularly is on those high-speed roads where there is the greatest risk of serious injury in the event of a collision. My concern relates specifically to the non-principal roads, C and UC roads, that service rural areas that are vital for residents, vital for active transport, which is an important subject in the matter that we've just been looking at, vital also for cyclists and others who are enjoying the delights of the Wiltshire countryside. The figures provide the basis for the first time for comparing community areas one with another. But of course, the community areas vary considerably in size. So in order to make an effective comparison, it is important to take the lengths of roads in each category, in each area, and compare expenditure over a number of years across the county, area by area. I should say that when I first made this request, I asked for the data in the form of pounds per kilometre per area. But I've been able to make that comparison for myself because the kilometres of roads in each area of the county is readily available information. Over time, one would expect in each area that the expenditure per kilometre in each category of road would tend towards the average. But that is not, in fact, the case. Having done the analysis, and I'm very happy to provide officers with a copy of the analysis I've carried out, I can see that there's a significant variance across Wiltshire. Compared with the average for the whole of Wiltshire, on a pounds per kilometre basis, the sea and unclassified roads in Tidworth and Westbury are 10% or so below the average over 4 years. In Chippenham and the surrounding villages, they're 15% below the average over the last 4 years. In Malmesbury, 20% down. In southwest Wiltshire, my own area, nearly 30% below the average. In Pewsey, 35% below. Devizes, over 40% below. And in Marlborough, more than 45% below the average. Now, I don't expect a reasoned comment today on the reasons why there is this widespread displayed in this pattern. What I do think is reasonable is to request that the questions that arise should be properly addressed in the annual report on highways that will be presented to this committee in another couple of months' time. The residents of those areas where road maintenance has been underinvested over the last 4 years compared with the rest of Wiltshire deserve answers to the questions that arise, and I hope to see that in your annual report.
Who wants to respond to that then, Nick?
Thank you. I will respond very briefly, and then I will hand over to Dave Thomas to respond to the second part of your questions. I just need to make something very clear to you, Councillor Budden. You talk about highways expenditure. Highways expenditure does not come from the council tax. It comes from a central government grant called the Highways Maintenance Block, which is in round terms about £20 million a year. Where the council tax is being spent, not the council tax is being spent, the additional investment that this administration has put in is over and above what comes from central government. So it's not council tax that's being spent. And I think you need to understand that we are reliant upon the most significant amount of our highways expenditure from central government. And as I've said, and I'm not making this a party political issue, because of the way the finances of this authority have been managed, we've been able to input additional investment into the highways. And we're starting to see a significant improvement in the highways in Wiltshire, and that has been validated by the DFT within the last week or so, that there is a significant incremental improvement in the quality of our highways compared to every single local authority that manages highways across England. So I'm sorry to say your continual points about saying there is insufficient investment in the highways in this county, I'm afraid is factually and empirically incorrect. Dave, I would ask you to respond to the specific issues about averages and above and below the mean.
Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. When we're investing in the highway network across the county, we're doing it, as has been said, on the evidence-led basis. We don't look at which community areas we're investing in. That isn't really taken into account in our decision making. It's based on the condition surveys and also comparison with our network hierarchy. Some of you may be familiar that we have 11 levels of categories within the hierarchy of roads, and that helps to determine the level of investment that each of those levels get. Picking up on the specifics that Councillor Budden has raised, more than happy to take on board your analysis, and we'll provide a detailed response to that. It may be outside of the annual report process. We may incorporate those answers to your questions within that report. Happy to do that, but we'll have a look at your questions before making a decision on that for you. As Councillor Holder has mentioned, we've spent this year looking at additional investment over and above the norm that we get from the Department for Transport. We will be bringing a paper to a future meeting of the Environmental Select Committee, setting out the annual review, and that will demonstrate where that additional funding has been spent, and hopefully at that stage we will start to see the kind of impacts that that additional investment has brought to the county overall. I think that's probably all I want to say at the moment.
Okay, you're all happy with that, Dick?
If I may come back on that, I'm most
Yep, just the one.
grateful. I'm sorry, sir. I'm most
just the one,
grateful
yeah.
to Dave Thomas for his response. Firstly, though, in brief, in response to Councillor Holder, I was not making a point today. I did not make any remarks today concerning the total level of investment in roads maintenance. The whole of my submission was about the differences between the areas, and it is the way in which we are spending the money that is available to us that is of concern to me here. And let me say to Mr. Thomas specifically, thank you for your response. I entirely take the point that, as you say, you are responding to commission surveys. Again, not wishing to be parochial, I am aware in my own division of parish councils that are so dissatisfied with the level of maintenance in their network, in their area, that they have asked to see the condition surveys so they can see for themselves whether these are being properly taken into account. And so far, although they have written to Samantha Howells, they have not received any response to those requests. That may be a subject for another question another time, and maybe another year of waiting for answers.
Thank you, Councillor Budden. Sam?
If I may, Chair, just in summary, before we move forward, I think it's important to highlight sometimes these things are a lengthy process, and I reflected at a previous meeting, we have to ensure a proportional approach in terms of delivery on the ground and data collection. I think we reflected as an officer team, but also as a member group, that Highways and Transport have made significant improvements in terms of engagement, and Councillor Budden, we welcome those additional suggestions, which will try and move forward in terms of open and transparent data. But I do just want to highlight it is a challenge with the resources available to us. So if there are outstanding actions, I'll happily take those away and seek to prioritise those, but my focus is ensuring we are delivering on the ground as well. I would just say, you've reminded me actually, so thank you, the additional investment, as Councillor Holder has said, has enabled further interventions on the rural network, and I think your predecessor, Councillor Holder, Councillor Thomas, actually made a point of asking each area board where their local priorities were, and we have undertaken a very comprehensive assessment of that local priority list. There were clear areas in the rural areas in terms of unclassified and C roads, which were identified for investigation. That work has now been completed, and where those areas have met our intervention criteria, work has been programmed, and some of that work has already been completed. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to go to other members now. Councillor Wallace?
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, thank you for this data. I absolutely love data and had great fun looking through this. I came to slightly different conclusions than Councillor Budden. And I have to say, what Councillor Budden says is really interesting, and particularly in relation to Devizes and a supposed underinvestment there. And if I had 100 residents from Devizes North here, they would all say to you, or almost all of them would say to you, yeah, Devizes misses out, we don't get a fair deal. But I don't think that's accurate, because that's not what I see on the ground. And I think it's impossible to just take these figures and to look at them as they are. I think it's comparing apples with oranges. There are so many different factors, as David said there and Sam has said, that go into making the decisions. It has to be evidence-based and evidence-led, and we just can't say we're going to spend £1,000 here and £1,000 there. It just doesn't make sense. My question is specifically around Table C and the pothole gangs. And Devizes, I think, comes second there with total investment. to Pusey, with 143,000 spent there. And I just wanted some idea, do we know whether that, obviously, pothole gangs would be more reactive than planned. So do we know whether this is an indication of, rather than condition of the roads, more as to reporting? Are there high levels of reports in that area? Because I know that myself and other local members make a big point of pushing reporting on the app, and perhaps that's all of us as members should be doing that to make sure that we get this sort of investment in our area.
So I'll respond briefly, Ian. I think it's no doubt the reconfiguration of the My Wilts app will certainly help collect even better data than we've had in the past. Because, you know, the comments that you've made there about the investment in potholes and devices, that information would be based upon the slightly malfunctioning historical issues we've had with the My Wilts app. And I think it's absolutely imperative to reinforce to all local members, to clerks of parish and town councils, to local residents, that frankly, one of the most, if not the best way of making sure that the issues around potholes are raised is to do it through the app, and that functionality has improved. And I think it's fair to say that an element of the work on the potholes is reactive. But I think also with the additional investment that we've had, we're almost able now to sort of bring forward some of the scheduled repairs and use the Bobcat to fix not just the pothole, but the area around it, to provide a much more certain and a better fix than we've had in the past. I don't know if you want to add anything, Sam.
I think that's absolutely right. And I would just reflect on, obviously, the prolonged and extreme weather we're experiencing. So mindful, we had a very difficult season last year. And obviously, given recent months, we do anticipate that to go up. But where the additional investment has helped us, again, is ensuring that we're making better use of our prevention techniques, but also that reactive response as well. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Dave.
Sorry, just a specific issue around devices that might help explain matters is that one of the other things that we have to take into consideration when doing our major maintenance planned works is that we have a lot of disruption on the network from utility works, and those we have to coordinate, particularly in devices. In the last 12 months, we've had substantial disruption due to extensive utility operations going on. What that does mean is that because our planned interventions are put back, the deterioration on the network continues whilst we're waiting for the utility works to be completed. And so we would expect the number of pothole reports in those circumstances to increase because we're not being able to be allowed in on the network to do our planned interventions.
Okay, right. Councillor Walters and then Councillor Perry.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you, Dick, for raising this. I think it's very valuable. And thank you, Nick and the Highways team for producing the data. I think that it's this sort of analysis that helps us. It flushes out the questions. It makes us focus, and it makes us realise how complex this issue is. And as you know, Dave pointed out, the number of potholes, you know, the amount of roads that are expected to be maintained. But coming back to Nick Holder, Nick, you mentioned risk and so on. I do actually come from a risk management background. And the key things about risk are identifying the weightings that you apply to those risks that you anticipate. And we know that there are algorithms, and sometimes those algorithms aren't necessarily kept up to date. They don't necessarily reflect changes and so on. So my question to you first of all is, who do you think on these small, lower category roads suffer most from risk attached to maintenance of roads?
I don't really understand the question.
Which category of road user, okay, is most at risk from lack of maintenance of roads?
That's a very interesting question. Who do I think is most at risk of lack of maintenance of the road? I think I personally, it's a personal opinion, I would say that's really difficult to assess, because I think it depends where the road is located and who the main road users are. But I think that I'm not quite sure what the purpose of the question is, but I think, you know, generally speaking, I think we're all at risk. You know, all road users are at risk from roads that aren't maintained, whether we're walking, whether we're cycling, whether we're on horseback, whether we're in a motorcycle, whether we're in a bus, an HGV or a car. There is no doubt that in my opinion, I'm expressing a personal opinion here, that the lack of maintenance across the roads in the whole of the UK, I know we're here to talk about Wiltshire, poses a risk to all road users. It's my view. It's my personal view, Derek.
Thank you. Thank you. What I would say is, as both a motorist, a motorcyclist, a cyclist and a pedestrian, I'd say that on lower category roads, it is the cyclist that's most at risk, in the main, because the kind of parts of the road that end up by being damaged are often the edges of the roads, the potholes as well, and come wet weather, those potholes are impossible to judge. What appears to be just a piece of water on the road may actually be a 4-inch deep pothole. And, you know, you are over the bars, okay? So, to my mind, one of the elements that we need to consider here is bearing in mind that in the local transport plan, there are 288 references to active travel, okay? We're trying to drive people towards finding alternatives, both because it benefits us from reduction in carbon emissions, it benefits us from health in our population, it lowers the congestion on our roads. It makes good sense. And it is these minor roads, or in fact, not so minor roads, where the lack of maintenance on the road impacts on cyclists the most. So I would just leave you with that. Thank you.
Sam, you can have the algorithm on that one.
Yes, I'm not going to go into details of the algorithm, you might be pleased to hear, Chair, but what I would say, I go back to my earlier comments, and I'm pleased you've highlighted the LTP4, because I think we all recognise road safety as a priority for the Council, and there's a risk of actually considering asset management in isolation of understanding all the other interventions that we're employing. So I think we need to steer away from that, specifically in terms of our approach to asset management. Our decisions are often scrutinised in case of law or indeed by insurance companies. And what I would highlight is, we've touched on this previously, we have a defendable position which is recognised as best practice. So absolutely, as Councillor Holder has said, all road users are at risk, and our core priority is ensuring that we are minimising that risk within the resources available to us. So I should say we are recognised, as I say, leading the way in terms of our best practice, and indeed have been praised in some of the decisions we have undertaken. And I think it's really important that we understand where we are promoting active travel in potentially more rural locations particularly, there are a combination of different measures. It's not just about defects, it's about, for example, ensuring the right utility routes for cyclists, but also recreational routes. It's about the opportunities we have through pavement widening, for example. So I think the data, as you say, is really important, and understanding how we can make that as user-friendly, as I say, making sure that residents understand that, but understand it is one tool in the mechanism, if you like, to ensure we're delivering our business plan priorities. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. You know, I'm pleased to hear that you're using local knowledge as well to enhance the data that you're getting from your surveys. And I think that it's this level of detail that, that allows us to look at these figures from different aspects. So, you know, Dick will be looking at it from one perspective, and you know, other people will be looking at it from others, but having that data there is very valuable. Thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Chair. So, kind of Derek's stolen my thunder in that point in many ways, but I was going to go back to the evidence base and say the evidence you collect depends on your objectives or the question you're asking. And of course, if you're not thinking about cyclists, you're not collecting the right evidence. So very small potholes at the side of the road are a major deterrent for cyclists. It's not just about safety, it's about actually people feeling safe to use those roads, and particularly in urban areas. So children cycling to school, people cycling to the station where I live, and we've got one of the lowest on the main line route use of bikes to get to the station, partly because, you know, there aren't the cycle routes, but also the quiet roads aren't even safe enough in terms of you're going to hit something at the side of those roads. And I've seen a person on one of those small Bromptons go head over heels hitting a small pothole. So my question around it is, are we actually looking for the right evidence with regards to cyclists as part of our process? That's one question. Secondly, on utilities, it was just raised by David there. I find, again, as a cyclist, quite often particularly the fibre companies who dig up these roads, within months, the strips that they've put back in place on the road have sunk. Several that are a couple of years old are falling apart because what they're using is not the quality that the rest of the road is. And so you've got potholes developing, you've got cyclists hitting them at the sides again. Can we not, I don't know if the legislation allows it, but can we not make sure these utilities go back and put these right? Thanks.
I'll answer on your second point, Councillor Murray. Yes, that ability exists. Well, we do. Well, where we are made aware of issues where the utility companies have failed to reinstate the highway to the approved standard, then we absolutely have an ability as the Highways Agency to go back and insist that the highway is properly maintained at the cost of the utility.
Just quickly on that then, so how long does that last? Because I know there are some strips which are years old now and they're falling apart. So maybe 3-4 years old and they're falling apart.
So it's 12 months. Well, that's the framework within which we operate. We can't really go outside of that framework. If that's the framework that we operate within, I'm afraid. I appreciate it might not be the answer you want to hear, but it is the parameters within. It's the parameters within which we operate, I'm afraid.
I mean, can we actually check that they're using a proper quality material at the outset?
Tired listening to one meeting, I might just say.
I tell you what we'll do. We will get Dave to respond to you directly about this issue, if that's okay. Fine.
Okay, Sam.
Yeah, if I could just briefly provide a bit of additional context. I think it's important to recognise we are seeing unprecedented demand, as Dave has already said, in terms of access from utilities on the network. So we do monitor. We absolutely seek to ensure appropriate reinstatement, and we have a 24-month guarantee period. I think what I would also say is moving across in a wider context in terms of our inspection regime. We do undertake walk-in inspections where resources allow, but of course we have to again ensure a proportional response. So I can't say, Councillor Murray, we do cycling inspections, but absolutely we do have walk-in inspections, and we are particularly mindful of the rural runoff in areas. But again, we have to ensure an evidence-based approach in terms of maintaining and repairing any defects.
Just very, very quickly, when we're scanning the roads with these, I don't know what the machinery is, and we're going to put them on the back of bin lorries at one time, are they reaching out to the sides where the cyclists would use them? And do we have different standards for pothole size for cyclists?
Yes, they do. I'm conscious that we could get into a level of detail here, and I would just wonder whether it's worth providing a full written response for you, setting out the methodology and the frequency of surveys.
And again, this is down to members. Remember, if you get some maintenance done in a place, after the first couple of weeks, it looks very good. Then about 6 months later, it's deteriorated by that check. So down to members, that's members. You say, hang on, that's not right. This is, you know, so down to us to participate in that as well, to make sure that the officers are getting the support. Nick?
So in answer to your specific comment about how we survey the roads, I will ask the team to put together some sort of video actually showing one of the machines in operation, seeing it internally and externally in terms of the area and range that they cover of the highway.
Yeah, no, I'm not pressing you on the detail. I just wanted to know that you know, a small pothole that could send a cyclist off his bike or her bike is being considered. Yeah.
It will be picked up as part of the survey, yeah, for sure.
Okie dokie. Councillor Wheeler, then Jackie. He was first.
Thank you. I'm turning to potholes, seeing as I represent a very rural community, as does the chairman. What interests me is what record do we keep on pothole repetition, if you call it what you will, I mean, I know of some roads, and I'm going to be parochial in my division, where I can predict you fill a pothole on a small rural road, we get a large amount of groundwater, and that same pothole will turn up exactly 12 months later in the same condition as it was before. Therefore, what's causing the problem is the fact it's not the road surfacing, you surface the road until you blew in the face, but the fact that water is pushing up, the gravel gets dislodged, cars go through it, tractors go through it, and it gets dislodged. It seems to me that is something. I am extremely concerned about, do we keep a record of where potholes keep? You get the same pothole, you get repetition. And what link does that have to what I quite frankly think is a substandard standard of work that is carried out by a large number of utilities? In particular, I have in mind in my area at the moment, I think it's called OneNet or whatever it is, the fibre laying people, the ones who blew up Marlborough High Street quite successfully by going straight through a main cable when they were laying things. So far as I'm aware, and this covers over a wider area, and I look at the chairman to see if he bears it out, the quality of work they do to repair the road surface when they have finished is deficient virtually from the moment it starts, they lay it. And I would have thought, given the amount of work they are doing through various villages on various roads, we would be identifying that program and actually actively doing a follow-up to look at what was happening, say, 6 months after, and then getting them to come back and do the job again properly. Because it seems to me we have a situation where they say, oh, yes, it's been done. It also applies, by the way, to BT. I mean, whenever they put a hole in the road, they seem to sort of get around to doing it properly, and then everything sinks. I lost one tyre on one of those. So what I want to know is, do we study the history and the causation so we can predict and maybe then prevent the same thing happening again and again?
Here you go, Sam.
I'm going to make a start, and I'm sure Dave will want to come in on this point. So in terms of the number of repeat visits, as I call it, yes, we do monitor them, but I have to say we do have some of the challenges in data because of change in term maintenance contractor. So it is a core priority for us understanding exactly those trends that you've identified. But I think what we do need to be mindful of is, of course, sometimes we will go out and do a priority defect repair, which is temporary, and therefore we do a repeat visit, and that's an intentional repeat visit. So that work is in train. Are we able to provide a direct correlation to those utility companies? I don't think we can at this moment in time, but I know it's something the team are looking at. And I just wanted to provide some additional reassurance around those utility companies. Where they are not performing, and they're not performing regularly in Wiltshire, please be assured that we do call them in, and we have a governance framework around monitoring their work, and indeed not issuing permits if they have not demonstrated an appropriate level of effective reinstatement on the network. So I think Dave wants to come in. Thank you.
Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to what Sam is saying, with utility reinstatements, they have to meet standards that are set out at a national level. I have a team of inspectors that go out looking at the network, looking at the reinstatements that utility companies do. We cannot inspect 100% of all the work that the utility companies do. We just don't have the resource to do that. But where standards are not met, we will get the utility companies back in to do a proper repair. If after the 24-month guarantee period, or if it's an immediate safety issue, then we will undertake the repairs ourselves and recharge the utility companies for that. And as Sam has said, if we have repeated failures from individual utility companies, then we will not issue them permits to go out on the network and undertake any work until they can demonstrate to us that they can achieve the standards that are required of them, not just by us, but through the national standards that they are set up to abide by. We have had particular issues with fibre optic and those kind of utilities. They tend to employ a workforce that on a day rate basis. The guys get paid. The more they dig, the more they get paid. And that has led to difficulties with quality being achieved. The more established utility companies such as water, in some respects gas, they tend to employ more steadily and skilled operatives who know what they're doing. But certainly on the communications front, that's the area that we've picked up as having particular difficulties. But we do our very best, and there are mechanisms in place to address any defects.
Councillor Lay, Jackie, you had a question?
Thank you, sort of.
Question?
So thank you very much for all the work you're doing in Purton. And I think the key is we're the eyes on the ground. And I try to encourage my residents to be eyes on the ground so that when we have these issues, we're reporting them. And I can only urge other councillors to do the same. I keep all my road closures in a file, so I know when the road closure was done. I don't have the traffic management stuff, but the road closures I know about. GigaClear, who are our fibre optics, are on their way back through the village again because they're now wanting to clean through their culverts and things that they've put in. So, yeah, that's great, isn't it? Two things, well, three things actually, is that some of the potholes that I see actually are around established manhole covers that belong to the utility companies. And it's not the council who have to repair that, it's the utility company. So I go to the utility company to tell them as well as the council. So that's one thing. The other problem we have, and everybody probably in the rural areas have, are these overruns. And they are continual spots. They're not a whole road. They might be just where there's a pinch point or something. And I really wonder whether we need to be looking at how we deal with that, because some of these overruns, you've got the sharp edge of the tarmac, you've got the soft muddy bit, and when they fill up with water, the driver can't tell which is which, and of course that's when they damage their vehicles. So I think we need to have a better idea on overruns. And the third point I wanted to make and question is, with our reporting system, our app, do we have a little box that people tick to say, I'm a walker, I'm a cyclist, I'm a driver? Because that would give you your evidence. If it's all the cyclists who are complaining about the potholes, they've ticked the box to say I'm a cyclist and this is a dangerous pothole. And of course, if it's none of them report it, we know they're not that bothered.
Good idea, Jackie. Any more responses to that one? Nick?
Well, I'll respond briefly on the last comment, Jackie. As you know, the My Wilts app has only recently been relaunched, 4 or 5 weeks ago. I would suggest if you have some post-operational input, then speak to Ashley and to Mark Tucker, because I would imagine, like any IT platform, there will be amendments that are done, and it might well be that's something they can incorporate. But right now, that functionality isn't there, as you say. Just if I can just make one point, Chair, if you allow me a couple of minutes. I think, you know, Stuart, you talk about the frustration with utilities and fibre optic people, and one of the frustrations I have, and I do challenge the officers about it, is when, you know, a permit is given for completely reasonably, a permit is given for 7 days work, traffic lights go up for a 7-day period, and the work is done in half an hour on one of those 7 days. And that is massively frustrating. So when we are made aware of those issues, I have personally spoken to the officers and said, right, this is unacceptable, what can we do? I think it's a huge frustration for all of us. It's a frustration for residents saying work is going to start in 7 days. And as I say, it takes half a day, but the permit allows 7 days, the lights go up for 7 days, the traffic management is in place for 7 days. So we are trying to find a way of at least alleviating some of those challenges where there are traffic lights up for a length of time that are not needed.
Great, well done. Before I remove the proposals, to be fair to the highways team, last year was the second wettest wettest year on record for Wiltshire. So they've had those challenges. And if the road levels were to be brought up to standard, they say it take up to 50 years to bring them up to a good standard. So if I'm still alive, I'll be 115. If someone can wheel me out in my chair so I can look at it. I could, looking around the room, I can only see that Ben might be the one that's still alive to actually appreciate that we've got good roads finally. But I will move to the recommendations. And that is that the committee notes the report, which is A. B, requests that future highways review of service report incorporates a detailed breakdown of the expenditure information in its highways investment plans. And C, that we are to be updated about the process of preventing damaged roads and surveying roads, identifying repairs and monitoring third-party reinstatements. Can I have a proposal for that, please? Looking for a proposal. All right, Ian, and seconded by Stuart. All in favour of that? Thank you very much, and thanks for that report. Swiftly moving on, so I'm now running 16 minutes behind time. So, next report is, lost me page temporarily. Yeah, sorry, yeah, it's the update on the speed limit task group. So, this, I've got Jonathan C. waiting in the wings, and who is this one? Right, okay, away we go. Speed limit assessment. Jarvis and Nick Holder. Sorry, it's you again. Cheers.
Right, okay, again, as with the previous report, I'll be really brief. This is a piece of work that was undertaken by the task group that tasked, did some work with the Environment Select Committee, tasked officers to come up with some recommendations to change, to improve, update the way we assess the speed limit requests that we get through LHFIGS. I'm pleased to say that progress has been made on 7 of the 8 accepted recommendations. We are still working on the final recommendation, but that is within the agreed timeline. So this really is an opportunity for this committee and Councillor Seed as chair of the task group to provide some feedback to us on the recommendations so far.
Jonathan, I see you're waiting in the wings. Welcome. Would you like to add anything to the report?
Chairman, is that for me?
It is indeed.
Thank you very much. First, I'd just like to say that I welcome the detailed response of the executive and Councillor Holder and his team, and also welcome the detailed draft policy document. It's along the lines that we wanted to see. I particularly welcome the items 2.14 to 2.19, which help communities with the involvement that they want above and beyond the assessment of accident figures, and that was something that was very came out loud and clear in the at the task group. I welcome 3.24 about local concerns, but however, the one cautionary note that I would inject into this, and this is an administration's policy issue, is that almost all of the assessment and the application for assessment is put down to LHFIGS. And as Councillor Holder will probably know, I have real concerns at the way that the cost is being spread of those assessments. And at the moment, and I know this is subject to review, the costs of those assessments are being passed on to towns and parishes at consultancy rates. Now, I and others have asked that that is done at cost to the council, so that if a council officer is doing it, the council is not charging the parish council a consultancy rate for use of a council officer. They should be, in my view, charged at the very most at the cost of the council. That is a side issue, but it does affect where this goes. but in general, I think I welcome it. I would like to see the last recommendation work, but as Councillor Holder has assured, that's going to happen within the timescale. But particularly, the one highlighted point that the executive have recommended, have accepted, is that we are not simply relying on accident figures to trigger speed limit assessments, and local concerns can be deployed in a variety of ways, and that was front and centre to where the speed limit assessment task group was. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Jonathan. I'm going to open it for questions, and my first question I got is from Councillor Walters, my Vice Chair. Derek.
Right. Well, as you may or may not know, this the task group was initiated by me as a result of some experiences that I encountered, where I felt that that a rather mechanistic process was taking place. What I'd like to say is, first of all, is actually thank you both to Jonathan for chairing the task group, okay, and I completely endorse the points you've just recently made, and thank you very much to Highways for all the work that you've done, because obviously there's a substantial amount of work that goes into this, and I do understand the complexities and so on. However, what I would say is that my concerns at the beginning were the fact that I felt that Highways were basically they were just using Atkins to come up with hard data, and believe me, I'm a hard data man all the time, but it was basically failing in the sense that the driver was over the fact that if traffic was travelling at a speed that was perhaps faster than what was looked for, that it was felt that if you reduced the limit, that you were actually not going to deliver, because the concern was over enforcement. Now, I don't know any other element, if you like, of the law whereby we look at the overall results of a legal change to determine whether we introduce that legal change in the first place. I mean, otherwise you would have no rate laws, would you? Because the enforcement is so poor. Now, I don't think that enforcement should be something that determines whether or not we put a speed limit in the first place. I believe strongly that Highways, with their experience and their expertise, I think should be trusted, along with the input from the local community and others, road users, to come up with the appropriate limit for the road. And once you've determined the appropriate limit for the road, everything else falls on from there. If you end up feeling that you have to put in changes to the layout of the road in order to get the appropriate outcome, then so be it. Okay, if you think that speed indicator devices and so on will achieve that, then so be it. But basically, you start off by coming up with a professional judgment. And frankly, I feel that Highways are lacking an ambition here to take this on, in relying so heavily on a very data-driven Atkins report. I think that one of the things that I am slightly concerned is that in LPT4 we see 288 references to active travel. In this report we see just one. The reality is that in the guidance that the Department for Transport offers, it basically mentions all sorts of vulnerable road users and other road users apart from the motorist. And so I'm really pleased that Highways is now looking at this and giving some weight to local perceptions, because I think that it's often local perceptions that identify risks. I am slightly disappointed that we haven't looked at predictive measures. There are AI systems out there that give data. I don't know how good they are, So I would leave that up to the professionals to determine. But it'd be nice to look at means by which we can prioritise areas so that we can turn around perhaps to those sort of systems to give us that kind of data. Overall, I'd like to see this move forward, particularly to make sure that we take into account those local views. Thank you.
Nick, do you want to respond to that?
I just want to respond very briefly to a couple of points. On your last point, we are actually already considering using AI to help with this activity that's taking on, but it's very much in its infancy. So we want to make sure that if we do embrace it and use it more comprehensively, it is actually going to be better than what we got right now. The other thing I wanted to say, and I don't know if Sam wants to add anything else, is Derek, I share your frustration with some of the historic things that have been said about Atkins. You know, I've been in LHVIG meetings myself previously to being in this role where Atkins are used as the bad guy, but, you know, well, Atkins have done the work and they're telling us this. And I think we have tried to turn away from using that language. I've encouraged our officers to say that actually Atkins undertake the work, but the recommendations, whether they are in support of a change or to say no change, absolutely comes from one of our officers. They don't just blindly read a report from Atkins, top and tail it, change it, put their names to it. They actually analyse, identify, refer to the guidance notes from DFT, and the recommendation absolutely comes from one of our officers. But I accept that historically we have not been very good at saying it's an officer-led decision with support from Atkins doing the analysis. We have kind of said, I'm repeating myself, well, Atkins have told us we can't do it, so we can't do it. That is massively frustrating, and we absolutely need to move away from that.
Do you want to add anything, Sam? Or, nope. Okay. Okay, Derek.
I'd just like to say thank you very much for that very honest response. And I would just like to say that, you know, what I would look for is that, that you don't necessarily need to employ Atkins on every speed limit assessment. Okay, I don't think you need to do that. I think that we need to have the officers having the confidence that their expertise and experience allows them to make those kind of decisions. So I leave it there. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, just got one, Nick. Councillor Murray, yeah.
Just a quick one. Do LC whips get taken into account when looking at speed limits and the appropriateness of speed limits? Because obviously there are routes where you got recommendations for active travel.
I'll let one of you work that one out. Derek, Dave, sorry.
I think what you're asking, Nick, is that do we take into account the type of road users when doing a speed limit assessment, be those road users, they could be pedestrians, they could be cyclists, they could be scooterists and the like. And those are given due consideration, yes.
Well, it's more about the predicting, so if you've got an LC whip that there's a quiet street or something that might be part of an active travel route, and we're looking for a speed limit change, would you think, well, actually that fits quite well. If that was a 20-mile-an-hour street, that would fit quite well with that forward strategy?
Yes, is the quick answer.
Great, that's the best answer of the day, the yes. Okay, fantastic. No other one wants to speak on that one, so let me just go. These are just, so the A, that we note the report, and B, request that the Select Committee is updated on the implementation of the new policy and its impacts in 18 months' time. Proposer from the floor on that one? Stuart proposed, seconded. Tom Rounds. Okay, thank you very much. All in favour? Yes, good. And thank you for that report, and thank you for that. Right, moving on then to, I think that's the end of the highways team's work for the day, isn't it? I think we're just left with, so if you want to sidle off, thank you very much for your attendance. Good luck. Find the right road to go out on. Make sure you don't fall in any potholes. Right. Thank you, Jonathan, as well. Sorry, thank you, Jonathan C. Right. Item 9, the Wiltshire Council Housing Board Annual Report. Councillor Alford, you are here, or is he? Yeah, oh, you
I'm up
moved.
here.
How
I
do
moved.
you do that? Right, magic. Right, up to you then.
Brilliant.
Floor is
Cheers. Cheers, Chair. So the report you've got in front of you is quite a high-level report, just giving you an overview of what the Housing Board have been up to, and obviously by extension, the HRA. So we've got the dream team here as well, who are going to be able to answer any questions that come up. But just as a quick overview then, so it's been a busy old year for the Housing Board, as it always is. So just a few points, there's a big section in there of some of the perhaps highlights, the achievements so far. We've managed to amalgamate a number of different action plans all together to help sort of streamline what we're doing. We've had a complete audit, a compliance audit done, which has found out and gone through all the sort of the compliance certification and so on, and made sure that, demonstrate the council's in pretty good standing on that front. One of the things to note is our electrical inspections. They're often quite challenging. You'll know, if anybody has been watching what's going on with other local authorities and the housing regulator, you'll see that electrical inspections are a challenging area for a lot of stockholders, but excuse me, we've got all ours in now for a 5-year cycle and so on. So we're up to 99% compliant on that, which is excellent news. We've developed a damp mould case management process. So obviously there's been a lot of talk over the last few years about damp and mould cases. It tends to affect lots of stockholders, particularly those that do hold a lot of old council housing stock, which we do because ours is largely sort of 60s and 70s units. So to help us manage that, we have a damp and mould process, which is helping to streamline that and make sure that we can channel resources most effectively and get on top of those cases too. And you'll notice as well that the overall our tenancy satisfaction scores are significantly improving, and in some cases significantly, so that overall they're up. So it's been a busy time. Officers are doing an absolute cracking job, I think, and the Housing Board is very pleased with that. A few things just to flag up as well. Of course, we continue with the HEAP and the Build programme. And looking forward, if I just mention a little bit about the Build programme, you're seeing their construction costs have obviously been hit quite significantly over the past few years due to inflation, challenges around getting contractors and so on. This is something that we are looking at, and we're going to be looking quite a bit more detail perhaps over the next few months, particularly to make sure that our Build programme is the leanest and best value for the HRA it can be. And just to add, in terms of that sort of horizon scanning, the other sort of two big things that are coming our way, I think that we need to make sure we're fully prepared for is obviously we have to deal with the challenges of inflation. We've seen, we set our rents, of course, based on inflation that comes in September. September was perhaps the low point for inflation at the moment. Inflation was coming down, got to September, seemed to hit a drop, which is when we take our rent inflation from, and then it's increased again. So that's an area we're quite conscious of, and that obviously feeds through, particularly in housing where there is a lot of construction and maintenance. And then finally, the role of the regulator of social housing and what they're playing now. With local authorities who are stockholders, any stockholders more than 1,000 homes is now being inspected by the regulator of social housing. That's a new development, so that's created a new regulatory sort of environment for us to adhere to. And we've been doing a lot of work, and we are preparing for that time when we do get an inspection. So there's a little bit of an overview. Chairman, I can hand over to the officers, or if there's any questions, I'll leave it with you.
Unless the officers want to add anything at this stage, should I take questions and then do it that way round? Yep, okay. So for the Housing Board, so we've got our team here. Do I have any questions from members of the committee? And everybody's looking at their laptops. Well, that's a bit of a difference, isn't it? Right? You're doing that good a job. I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask a question, actually. How many council properties have had their EPC rating upgraded, and to what level? That's yours, Nick.
Yeah, as a number, the programme started about 4 years ago, and we based the initial sort of calculations of EPC certification. We didn't have EPC certificates in place for all of our properties. So at the moment, we're currently getting, as the report shows, a full stock condition surveys done of all of our properties. So they are, we're getting EPC certificates coming in. So as our clone data gets replaced by exact data, the figures are going up and down. They're a bit haywire at the minute, Jerry, to be honest with you. But what this means is over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we've done approximately 600 component interventions. So improvements in insulation, doors, windows, heating systems, and so on and so forth. And each time we do that, the energy certificate moves upwards. We're not doing a program of whole house retrofit. We're doing a phased retrofit. So instead of going into, we've done it on a few properties, test properties, where we've gone in and done an individual property and done everything. So that would have gone from, say, an F to a B. But with the rest, we go through programs of work, the EPC improves step by step with each one of those interventions. So we're going to start reporting on stats for both the impact on the EPC certification and the componentry that we're doing. It's going to form part of our HRA scorecard in the coming months.
Thank you for that. And then, and what types of homes sort of are being built and acquired at this stage? What type?
So the build programme is a mix of housing that's already in the market, so second-hand stock as such, and also new builds. So we buy stuff off our developers, so they're new builds Section 106. We've also acquired new builds that haven't been Section 106, which we call additionality. And then we are doing a mix of modular construction homes via the roll along, and also trialling traditional build as well. So we cover the breadth of the market in terms of construction types.
Okay, and sort of bedroom wise, are they 1, 2, 3 beds? Are they?
We base it on need of the local area. 1 beds are built where the need demonstrates it. It very much depends on the programme. So one of the programmes we did was Local Authority Housing Fund. That demanded 2s and 3 beds, for example. But we are trialling different things to try to cater for lots of sort of property sizes, but also the occupants as well. So we're trialling a few things where we do, ground floor bedrooms, for example, that sort of thing, to see if we can change the market a little bit.
Thank you. Derek, any question?
Yeah, just quickly. The Local Housing Association, to myself, has a lot of problems with staff and getting contractors and so on to carry out works. And I have to say, my experience of their surveyors has been not impressive. Do you have problems with? Do you have, for starters, do you have in-house teams? Do you go out to outside third parties? Are you encountering any problems? Could you just give us an update on that? Thanks.
Thank you, certainly. So in terms of the delivery of our work programmes, we have a bit of a mixed economy. So we have our own in-house trade teams, so carpenters, plumbers, decorators, etc. But we also rely extensively on external contracts for servicing activity, for repairs and maintenance, and for capital works, as well as the build programme that Mike's just referred to. So we are sort of constantly in a position where we have to reprocure those because we have so many contracts. There's always something that requires a refresh and engaging with the market. It's true to say that contracting is always difficult for a range of reasons. Probably the operating environment for us and for those businesses is increasingly challenging in terms of financial margins, them being able to attract suitable and competent staff. That's also a pressure for us. So we have some areas of the business that from time to time can be difficult to recruit to. Even in our housing management team, social housing is not something that is necessarily a traditional career path for individuals. It wouldn't be featured in if there is still any recruitment careers advice in schools. I don't think there is perhaps, but it wouldn't have been one of those traditional things that would have been an obvious route for people to discuss. And people generally fall into social housing from other sorts of careers. And that in some respects can create challenges for us. But we're looking to raise our external profile. We're looking to engage. We're looking to bring on our own apprentices, so grow our own to a degree, and we also have a graduate placement that is an LGA scheme that's currently in place, and that officer is working within the housing function as well. So we're cognizant of those pressures. The economic pressures on businesses are also significant. The recent impact of national insurance changes as well add a sort of more recent addition of spice to that whole pressure, I suppose, on those businesses. So we don't we try and have not all our eggs in one basket. So we try and have a fairly diverse portfolio of contracts. So we're not wholly reliant on any individual, because obviously that is a high risk in terms of those operators going into the wall. But we know that other housing providers put a huge amount of work within one contractor. That might create operational efficiencies, maybe cost savings, but it's also quite a risky approach in terms of where we have seen large contractors fail over recent years.
Ian McClellan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Listening to, watching the, and looking at the tenant satisfaction measures, none of them are wonderful, and collectively they're pretty average. If you were managing a set of expected results from your customers to get as low as 36 and the top one being 72%, I wouldn't be very happy. I'm sure you're striving to improve. So how can you get all of those levels to a much higher satisfaction rate? And particularly the one that is really concerning, although it's the lowest and easy to pick on, and it has gone up from 26% satisfaction to 36% on our approach to handling complaints. Now, that's an area, if you get a customer and you get a complaint, where I would think we would excel, to be quite honest. Because it's an easy interaction. The customers come when they've got a real issue, and if we solve it, we should be getting a really high result from that sort of customer. And yet we're still getting very low results. So, and that's just one of them. The whole lot is not great when you look at them. So how can we up those considerably, and what are we doing to up those considerably, and what are our interactions that make that better? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I guess it comes down to what you use to judge good. And we're in a particular type of business where we have hundreds of providers up and down the country that provide a good benchmark for the level that we and how we judge whether we're doing a good job in that respect. And in the table in the report, it sets out our benchmark across the sector, which shows that many of our scores there are above or at or above that benchmark criteria. So social housing is a tricky business. The people involved are often in the most challenging situations financially and other vulnerabilities. And we have to provide services based on, to a degree, some limited availability. So it is a challenging, with the cost of living pressures and other things, a challenging environment for social housing residents to live within. And what we are mindful of particularly is the distinction there between what the social housing norm is, if you like, by observing that benchmark, and the sorts of levels you might expect to get if you were in a more sort of wholly service-based commercial sort of sector, where I would agree that levels towards 90-odd% would be more relevant. So it's within its context, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. And within that context, we're doing okay. We've raised our satisfaction levels across the board. We will, of course, not be complacent, and we will strive for better. But when it's informed by the sector benchmark, which includes housing associations, which have substantially more resources focused at their interface with their customers, perhaps a shinier and more modern in some occasions a way of residents interfacing with their services, that effectively sets the context for us. In relation to complaints, we have done a lot of work on our complaints process because of the stronger presence of a new social housing ombudsman. It's really pleasing within our scorecard to see that in terms of the statutory code of practice we have to adhere to, that we're hitting 100% compliance now in terms of our turnaround time for complaints. That's a good thing, and that's where we need to be because it's a statutory requirement. But of course, in a complaint, we will be saying, yes, we uphold your complaint sometimes, but you'll also be reaffirming a no, because sometimes, and quite frequently, we have to say no to things because often requests we get may be unrealistic, maybe someone is in the wrong, and we have to say no and recount that as part of a complaint process. So in the context of someone having gone through a complaint process and then not being happy with the outcome, what this measure is supposed to measure the experience that they receive, and obviously we want them to have a good experience even if the outcome they receive is not what they'd hoped for, and that's an area we will continue to try and refine in terms of the quality and the level of engagement we have through a complaints process, and that's something we're working with the team on at the current time. So I guess overall within its context, we're continuing to improve, but it's a key area of focus for us. And we've got some more plans in the year to come to continue to drive up how we interface with our customers to assist with that.
Just quickly, briefly.
Just a bit of clarification. So you mentioned the housing associations, and they've got more money and lots of glossy things. So I'd assume their results are higher than ours. So is that what you're saying, that they've got more money to throw at it, so they have better results, which leaves ours even worse than on that I'm looking at this combined outcome here? Is that what you're saying?
It will vary. It will be a mixed landscape across all providers, both housing associations and local authorities. But when I look to a large housing association that has many more units, they are able to resource teams who will specialise in their communications process. They will specialise in extensive channel access to reinforcing messages of they're doing a good job to their residents and looking to move their residents' perceptions forward so they get better outcomes when it comes to surveys of this sort. We are looking to move in that direction. In our business plan, we have put some additional resources aside for a post which is going to be called Customer Experience Manager. We're just on the cusp of recruiting to that post now to help us try and mirror some of that, how we manage our reputation, how we reinforce a really good customer journey through our processes, because sometimes it still can be a little bit clunky. So we are trying to address that, but it's difficult. With the housing sector, it would always be a mixed bag because there's mixed performance. But we are looking to the best in the sector to try and inform our improvement processes.
Okay, yeah, just very swiftly to sum up really what you're saying. All the last things you said, I look forward to. I'm surprised we're not already educating our customers to believe that we're doing well, because that's the key to customer service, is that they've been persuaded that we are doing well. And in terms of you mentioned the complaints about that, and at the end of it all, you can't win them all. I agree. And as a councillor, you can't. When a resident comes to you with a personal, not a complaint, a personal issue, and they think they're being hard done by, and we approach officers within the council, all we're doing is advocating their case and making sure all the facts are known by the council. We don't try and say, yeah, do this one for me or whatever. We're representing all of the information that we've managed to glean out of that person, that resident with the issue. And the officers then check against what we've made a judgment for and come up with an answer. So, oh, we didn't know this, that actually makes a difference, or yeah, we knew it all, or we didn't know that, but it doesn't make a difference. This is the answer. And I, as a councillor, go back to the resident and say, look, all of that information has gone in the system, and yes, it's added to the story, or no, it hasn't, because they knew it already. The judgment has been made, and it's a fair judgment because of these reasons. The resident doesn't say to me, well, you're crap, you're a 36%. They say to me, well, thank you for doing all of that and checking, and I now know that, you know, what needs to happen or not happen, or why I'm in this position. Thank you. And I'm sure if they did a tick on me, I'd get a good result, because, you know, at the beginning I say, look, I can't solve everything, but I'll make sure your case is properly known and everything you've told me and I've got out of you is represented. But the officers make the decision. And so I think there's plenty of leeway in there for you to get those messages across, and we'll become, you know, you'll become as good as me.
Was that just, I hope that was a comment, Ian, that you were making there, because I don't want to get a long-winded answer on that, because the clock is starting to go rapidly against me now. So, Phil, did you just want to add?
Yeah, just to be sort of super quick. I mean, we was just touching on something that James said earlier. It is worth bearing in mind as well that we do, when you talk about resource, you've got to bear in mind as well that our housing stock is let as social rents. So we charge approximately 50–60% of the market rate. When you're looking at the other RPs, they charge affordable rents, which is sort of 80%. So they do have significantly greater resources. You will also know, probably from previous work as well, that 80% of our tenants are in receipt of housing benefit or you know, universal credit. So we've got a different cohort that we're working with, and they are in very challenging circumstances. With regard to addressing issues and complaints as well, it's also worth bearing in mind that how we respond is very heavily influenced by the regulatory framework in which we operate. You know, there's not many areas of housing which government and a regulatory body aren't involved in, so it is highly contrived. And quite often we are just doing what the regulator is saying that we have to do. And many times tenants want us to go above and beyond that, but we simply can't go above and beyond it, because then you've got to do it for everyone, and we just don't have the resource to do that. And we, of course, need to prioritise it where it needs to be done. I mean, we've done a lot of work on improving our reputation, working with local residents. So we do produce a newsletter on a regular basis that goes out to tenants. We have a list of, sort of, you said, we've done responses. We've introduced the new interactive iHousing portal, so people can access our services through that route as well. So there's a huge amount that we've done. We're quite conscious that there's more. We have every aspiration to do more. And just flagging up things like makes a positive contribution in the area. We do give out grants, and we hear bids from groups of residents. So there's a lot we're doing. I think we probably could do more in terms of advertising it, but there's always that balance between how much do you invest in shouting about how great you are and how much do you invest in being great. And our priority is to spend the money on being good at what we do. You know, and I know other housing providers don't, you know, maybe don't see it quite that way, but that for us is the most important thing. But of course we are seeing, I think it's still fair to say that we are seeing an uptick in what we're doing. Things are improving. We've got a plan to get better and to do more. So hopefully we'll see improvements on those. But it is great to see us doing so well against those benchmarks, because that is against a whole sector, and we are in a more challenging set of circumstances than a large chunk of it.
It's all right. I could take the players off a bad light in a minute, because we're going to run out of time here. Nick, you had a question. Is it just a question?
Yeah,
please.
A quick one. So forgive me if it's in the report somewhere, but we were aiming to get all our housing stock to EPC B at one point, and have we still got that target, or has it changed a bit? And how are we doing? And what are the main constraints? Is it getting money out of the social housing decarbonisation fund, or is it the fact that we have to wait for tenants to be in a position where we can do it, or, you know, what are the practicalities of that? what was the other bit? Sorry. Oh yeah, and the purchase of the new of additional homes that you're talking about, when you, particularly from developers, new builds. Are we insisting that they're net zero at the outset? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. In terms of our aspirations around the EPC level of our stock, yes, that's not changed. So our target is for EPC B. We still have that investment wide into our business plan, although we for the next cycle in February, we've got our budget report, which will articulate some of the pressures that financially that the business is under in all regards. And we've also identified that we've been installing those components that Nick referred to for some time now in our homes. And we need to take stock. What have we learnt? What are the good things we're doing? And what's the overview? So, and some better metrics for how we can evaluate improvement. So undertaking a range of component installations in different properties versus should we consider or reconsider treating and putting all of those components into one property so we fully treat a home in one go, as it were. And there's a range of other factors. But yes, we've in our plan this year fundamental review of the HEAT programme, and yes, we will continue. We have had a little bit of success with grant funding in the past, but we need to get back on that issue and pursue that third-party money where it's available for sure. I'll let Mike comment on the acquisition programme.
So it comes down to three different things. If it's something that we're building, then yes, they are all carbon zero. If it's something that we acquire from the market, there's a little bit of a transition in the market now between using gas boilers or not, but as a minimum, it's a EPC A is what we're aiming for. We asked the question of whether or not they're retrofittable. So they then can become carbon zero if they're not already. But of course, with the second-hand stock, so stuff that's already in the market, then we can't because it is what it is. But our own premises, our own build, yeah, it's been that for several years now.
Right, no more questions. Thank you very much, because I want to keep moving. The clock is now going fast. Crawford, that the committee A, note the report, and B, request that the next Housing Board annual report is received by the Select Committee. All in favour, as I promised. Yeah, okay. Still, one thing that gives me a beef, and that is selling our flaming council houses. Sorry, when they sell them in rural areas, they don't get replaced. I'm not going to have a debate about it today. I've got time. 10, Cabinet Member Update. It says 30 minutes, but we've got, you're going to have 5 minutes each. Okay, that's all you're going to need, isn't it? You've had a long day. Nick, anything to just a quickie?
Yeah, I will be. Three things I wanted to say. First thing I wanted to say is just to, in this forum, congratulate the Highways team for the excellent work they've been doing, keeping our roads open in the last few weeks. For those of you who haven't seen the detail, throughout the really bad weather, we've had 3 teams going out every single night. They've been going out at 11 o'clock, sort of 2 o'clock, and again at 6 o'clock. They've done a great job. Sam's team and I are going to have a review of it to see how well it worked. The cold snap that we had was quite helpful, actually, because it would actually allow us to evaluate the winter resilience programme that we put in place. So that is now being reviewed. We're also reviewing our flood resilience activity based upon the unfortunate things that happened very recently in Chippen and Bradford and Avon and Melksham. So there's work being done there. I would encourage members and anybody else who's watching to make sure that your town and parish councils do get involved in the flood working groups, because they are really helpful. And we've had really positive feedback where town and parish councils have joined. And in fact, when we had the issue specifically a few weeks ago in Bradford and Avon, I was chatting to a member of the Bradford and Avon Town Council staff, and he said, thank goodness we'd gone to the flood resilience working group, because we actually knew what to do. So if you aren't members of it, I would encourage you and encourage your parish clerks to do it. The other thing that's causing us a slight amount of concern at the moment in the highways area is the lack of clarity around highways funding for next year. It's very late in the day. By now, we normally would have had confirmation from central government in terms of what the high maintenance block is. As I've said on a number of occasions, it's been around about 20 million quid a year for the last few years. We are being told it's going to be a 1-year settlement. We don't know what that's going to look like. We have been given about £6 million already from central government, specifically for potholes, which is a little bit more than we had from the previous government, who released the HS2 money. But there is a nervousness amongst the officer group here and the other councils that we speak to, that the delay of this time suggests that there's going to be a cut in funding in real terms for highways maintenance in next year. So we are in the hands of central government. Of course, we have got our additional investment that we're continuing to do, so that programme will continue, but it needs to be supplemented by the central government settlement. Thanks, Chair.
Are there any questions? If there are, 10 words max. 10 words.
Really quick on the flood resilience. We had flooding in part of Monkton Park for the first time where it went over the flood barrier, or it got under the flood barrier, however it got in. And people rang the council, asked for sandbags, and the council, which council that is, and they said, well, they didn't think it was necessary, and in any case, that's not a long-term solution. So talking to residents who want to know about a long-term solution, you know, where prevention isn't possible, are we doing anything to kind of educate people? Because I talked about where you can put floodgates on your front doors and you can protect your garages and you can do various things in terms of resilience, but people just don't know about it. Are we going to roll anything out that helps educate people to take measures, their own measures to help them?
We can do, but of course it's really disappointing that in this flooding incident, central government decided not to give grants out to householders and businesses. Historically, when Storm Henk happened, the central government made available grants of up to 5k per household to install preventative measures, floodgates, etc., for businesses and houses. After the last event, even though we had the flooding minister in Chippenham for the day, she went away from there and said, oh, I think we can get you some funding. It went very quiet for a week. And all of a sudden it came out and said there ain't no money. So whilst we as a local authority can advise, we don't have any money to give to householders. So I'm afraid it's back now to the householders paying for it themselves because the government have decided to cut it.
They would do that, but I think they just don't know what to do. It's the first time it's ever happened in that part of the world. You know.
We can certainly give some advice in terms of the type of things to be installed, but we wouldn't be able to help them access grant funding because there's none available, unfortunately.
Okay, and one more question from Richard, and then I'll move on to the next cabinet.
Thank you for the statement. I'm clearly disappointed that you are fearful about government funding for next year. Simple question. Will you please make sure that we all hear as soon as you know, and that you compare what you're going to get with what you got last year in whatever statement you put out?
Sure.
It's disappointing we don't know where we are on that one. Okay. Good. Tamara. And then Phil.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to bring additional updates to this committee. Just to highlight some of the transport areas, we look forward to bringing the delivery plans to follow on from LTP4 over the next few months. But just to summarise, on passenger transport, the BSIP plan, the Bus Service Improvement Plan, forgive the acronyms again, we were awarded 7 million, which will allow us to bring forward enhancements. That will include further improvements to services and improvements to infrastructure, including stops, shelters and accessibility to those. So the team are working hard on taking those plans forward at the moment. On the demand responsive transport, so the Pewsey Vale and wider service, in the 17 months of operation since the summer of 2023, I'm pleased to say that there is 66,400 passengers carried in 2024, and that passengers continues to grow. December 24 patronage was up by 15% compared to 2023. As I touched on earlier, we're also working hard to improve the operational and financial sustainability of the service so that we absolutely get the best bang for our buck, and we can make as many more communities have access to similar services and the flexibility of a DRT bus service as possible. On LEVI, and again, forgive the acronym, Local Electrical Vehicle Infrastructure, we received some initial funding from the Department for Transport. The team is now fully in place with all EVI, electric vehicle officers, in place, and the assessment is underway of the opportunities and needs. Thank you to those parishes and town councils that completed the survey. The focus for this phase of infrastructure will be on properties that do not have access to off-street parking. So really important in our towns with terraced houses and in some of our historic areas. On LC WIP, so the local cycling, walking infrastructure plans, the Salisbury, Chippenham, Devizes, Trowbridge LC WIPs are completed and approved by the Cabinet member. The Wiltshire-wide LC WIP and LC WIPs for Cairn and Melksham are in draft form following the public consultations, and LC WIPs for Amesbury, Corsham, Rawwood Bassett and Warminster have been commissioned. We're also making good progress with some key active travel schemes, and I look forward to more coming forward, and conscious of the comments that Nick made during the LTP section. I hope that's helpful.
That's fine. Everybody's happy, I think. And we've done some of that stuff today anyway. No questions? All right, okay. And then we come down finally to Phil Alford. Any updates?
Thanks, Chair. Not really. We've got the finance report coming in and the business plan for the HRA, but I think that's coming to you anyway in a few weeks, so I'll be back here and we can go through that a bit more detail. Other than that, I just say that the Rough Sleeper and housing team been working incredibly hard. Rough sleepers, as you'd imagine, have increased slightly. We know the cost of living has hit a lot of people, but in terms of rough sleeping, again, it tends to be driven by things like domestic abuse. But we are seeing it as particularly challenging at the moment for people generally within the housing market, because a lot of landlords are leaving the market because it's quite a challenging time for them, and that is, of course, feeding through. So there's a lot of pressure, but the team is still working amazingly hard, and fair play to them. Thanks.
Okay, well done. Thank you very much. Any questions? No, I think the clock is getting to us now. That's good. Right, well, thank you, people, for coming along, Cabinet members and that. Right, forward work plan, pages 717 to 726, if you can find it in your thing. Any comments on the forward plan? Everybody happy with the forward plan? We've only got one more meeting now before the elections, which is March the 3rd, so that we approve the forward work programme. All in favour of that? Yep, thank you. Urgent items, I have none. Date of the next meeting is 4th of the thing. Final item, we have to stay behind for 2 whole minutes, just to sort of get any feedback, whether it went well, whether it didn't go well. This is for ONS.